No, I'm taking my mask off. I assume you don't care. I don't care.
Are we unmuted? Okay, we will call the meeting to order and stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all. Roll call, please.
Alderman Heather Alder. Alderman R.J. Flores.
Here.
I can't hear from
Alderman
you.
Bruce Galloway.
I'm here, but I forgot to turn on my.
They called you.
Alderman Nathan Poston.
Here.
Alderman Jason Schaefer.
Here.
And Alderman Ted Smith.
Here.
All right, we had, as you can see, a couple of aldermen that didn't realize this was a Zoom, so we're making room. So please don't think that you all that are in Zoom land were not invited. That's not the case. We just happened to be that way. So anyway, just wanted to explain that. All right, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of August the 3rd? Posted, do I hear a second? Schaefer. All right, all in favor? All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of August the 10th? Poston? Schaefer again. I feel like I'm at Wimbledon going back and forth looking at hands. All right, all in favor? Okay. No ceremonial matters, no visitors. Okay. We have several new bills tonight. The first one is 3171. Ted?
Yes, Your Honor, I move that we place Bill 3171 on its first reading by title and description only, please.
Second.
Motion made by Smith, seconded by Poston to put Bill 3171 on its first reading. All in favor? Okay, Mr. Childers.
I think he needs to read it first.
Oh, yeah, I think you ought to read it first. That's a good idea, Amanda. I'm getting ahead of myself, please.
An ordinance of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Ozark, Missouri, approving and setting the tax levy for the City of Ozark, Missouri for the 2020 tax year.
Okay, each year, the City of Ozark must pass an ordinance to put in place its real estate tax levy. That tax levy is established by the Department of Revenue and sent to the City of Missouri, the City of Ozark, and that's what we have. If you, the tax levies did not change, have not increased from last year to this year. We do need to expedite this bill, however, because it is on a timeline. The city clerk must bring the bill as approved back to the county clerk so she can file that. So unless there's any questions, or after you look at Exhibit B of this ordinance, which really breaks down in detail what you're looking at and what the the assessed valuation of each category is. So you can find a little bit more information out about that. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, staff would recommend the approval and expedition of this bill.
All right, any comments or questions from the Alderman? Okay, if not, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that we place Bill 3171 on its second reading by title and description only, please.
Second.
Motion made by Smith, seconded by Poston to put Bill 3171 on its second reading by title only. All in favor? All right.
An ordinance of the Board of Aldermen of the City of Ozark, Missouri, approving and setting the tax levy for the City of Ozark, Missouri for the 2020 tax year.
Any questions? Okay, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that we adopt the Bill 3171 as ordinance 20-051.
Second.
Motion made by Smith, seconded by Poston to adopt Bill 3171 as ordinance 20051. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Bruce Galloway,
Aye.
Alderman Heather Alder,
Aye.
Alderman RJ Flores,
Aye.
Alderman Ted Smith,
Aye.
Alderman Nathan Poston,
Aye.
and Alderman Jason Schaefer.
Aye.
Okay, but before we go to 3172, let me just kind of a housekeeping thing here. I'm looking at the Zoom screen and at the camera, but 3 aldermen are to my left and out of my sight line. So it's hard to know who is seconding and unless you speak up. So if you have I'd appreciate it if you would say something, or whether you're in the room or on Zoom, so that I will know exactly who it is and not miss anybody, because that's my biggest fear, is missing a hand when usually I'm just looking at the screen. So thank you. All right, Mr. Poston, 3172.
Yes, Your Honor, I move that we place Bill 3172 on its first reading.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Poston, seconded by Smith to put Bill 3172 on its first reading by title and description only. All in favor?
An ordinance amending the corporate boundaries of the City of Ozark, Missouri by annexing certain real property generally known as 278 South Tanglewood Drive.
All right, Mr. Smith.
Yes, the applicant has requested the annex a residential property. This property is just north of the river subdivision off of NN. The property is compact contiguous with the city limits. There's an issue going on right now where the applicant, or had been going on, where the applicant's septic system had been failing. So they are needing to connect to the city sewer services. In doing this, the existing services are within the limits of the property per our ordinance, and they are compact contiguous. And so that with that in mind, there is the requirement for the annexation. Staff did recommend approval of this, and so did the P&Z Commission recommend approval 7-0.
All right, any questions from the Alderman? All right, is there a need to expedite this due to the nature of his need?
This
No.
cannot be expedited.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that answer. Then we will carry this over to the next legislative session. All right, Bill 3173.
Yes, Your Honor, I move that we place Bill 3173 on its first reading by title and description.
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Poston and seconded by Alderman Smith. Put Bill 3173 on its first reading. All in favor? Ms. Galloway?
An ordinance amending the zoning code and official map by changing the zoning classification of certain property located at 278 South Tanglewood Drive.
Okay, any questions or comments? Mr. Smith, you wanted to?
Yeah, this goes in conjunction with the application you just seen on the annexation. They are requesting the R1A zoning, which is appropriate based on the surrounding uses and the lot size that is existing out there. It's a little over 1 acre. It's 1.3 acres approximately in size. Staff did recommend approval. In addition, the P&Z Commission recommended approval 7-0. And in both applications, there was no opposition to the application.
Okay, any further questions? All right, we will hold that one over to the next session as well. Mr. Poston.
Your Honor, I move to place Bill 3174 on its first reading by title and short description.
Second.
Motion made by Poston, seconded by Smith to put Bill 3174 on its first reading. All in favor? All right.
Amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri, chapter 410, subdivision regulations to update language regarding escrow for sidewalk improvements.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Yes, staff was reviewing the ordinance 410.170 in regards to final plat and the escrowing of sidewalks. In reviewing that ordinance, in coordination with ordinance 410.330, we had recognized that it makes an allowance for escrowing public sidewalks for final platting process. However, we were realizing that it didn't consider property that had already been platted or developed, such as like a commercial lot, in the consideration of escrowing those sidewalks for an occupancy permit. Recently, we brought through to you guys for approval the escrow or the TCO ordinance that focuses more on a temporary occupancy for the landscaping and that we see a lot in residential. However, it didn't take into consideration of public sidewalks. So this is a revision to this ordinance to accommodate the allowance of escrowing the sidewalk construction that's a public sidewalk along the road frontages typically of developments that aren't tied to a plat. So this would allow the staff to go ahead and issue a temporary occupancy permit while those sidewalks may not be completed yet. It does accommodate a 60-day. To clarify, we left the plat sidewalk allowance of 1 year to be constructed. In this case of a TCO and an occupancy permit, we reduced that time frame to a 60-day allowance. And then in addition to both of those, they can be extended one time for one more 60-day period. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions or comments from the board?
I think this is one quick-
Please.
Mr. Smith, I know that you've asked to expedite this tonight. I'm happy to do that. Can you explain why the project is needing this?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said that you've asked me to expedite this ordinance tonight, and I'm happy to do that, but could you explain the project that necessitated?
Yeah, we currently have been working with Sunrise Baptist Church on their sidewalks, and really we didn't have an allowance in the ordinance for escrowing of the public sidewalk since it wasn't tied to a plat and it wasn't a private sidewalk for our TCO and our landscape ordinance. So if this ordinance is expedited, allow us to kind of work with them a little more closely. Currently right now they're temporary. They do have a TCO, but the sidewalk's not completed, but allow us to use this ordinance to collect an escrow fund, and then also in thinking of additional projects down the road. So that's why we did request to expedite this ordinance, is to help us accommodate an existing situation we have right now with the church.
All right, any other comments from the board? Questions? All right, Mr. Poston.
Your Honor, I move that we place Bill 3174 on its second reading.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Poston, seconded by Alderman Smith to put Bill 3174 on its second reading by title only. All in favor? All right, Ms. Callaway.
Amending the municipal code of the city of Ozark, Missouri, chapter 410, subdivision regulations to update language regarding escrow for sidewalk improvements.
All right, any further comments or questions? All right, Mr. Poston.
Your Honor, I move that we adopt Bill 3174 as ordinance 20-052.
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Poston and seconded by Alderman Smith to adopt Bill 3174 as ordinance 20-052. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Nathan Poston,
Aye.
Alderman RJ Flores,
Aye.
Alderman Bruce Galloway,
Aye.
Alderman Ted Smith,
Aye.
Alderman Heather Alder,
Aye.
and Alderman Jason Schaefer.
Can you unmute? We didn't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you. Alrighty, motion passes. All right, let's see, 3175, that is Alderman Poston again.
Yes, Your Honor, I move to place Bill 3175 on first reading by title and subscription.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Poston, seconded by Alderman Smith to put Bill 3175 on its first reading by title only. All in favor? All right, Ms. Callaway.
An ordinance approving the preliminary plat for Century Pines, generally located at 1001 North 10th Avenue, and authorizing the Director of Planning and Development to accept the dedication of the public streets and easements to the City of Ozark, Missouri, as shown on the preliminary plat, upon the applicant filing and recording a final plat that substantially conforms to the preliminary plat, and authorizing the city clerk to sign the final plat upon compliance with the terms of this ordinance.
All right, Mr. Smith.
Yes, this property is zoned R2, two-family zoning district. And if you have the plat in your packet, you would see it's the northern portion and kind of the western side of the Century Pines property. The staff has reviewed the preliminary plat for conformance, and all comments from staff have been satisfied. The city does have, and we have confirmed, there is adequate services to serve this development as far as utilities. No overlay districts are affected by this property. Or the property is not affected by the overlay districts. Based on the traffic study and review, there were no off-site road improvements that were required. Staff did receive the OSRD approval, Ozark Special Road District approval of this application. With that, the public improvement plans has been submitted and will be followed up to confirm that they are in conformance for construction. Staff does recommend approval. The P&Z Commission recommended approval 7-0, and there was no opposition to the application.
Okay, any questions? Staff, Alderman? All right, then if none, we will hold this over to the next legislative session. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that we place Bill 3176 on its first reading by title and short description only, please.
Second.
All right, all in favor? All right, Ms. Callaway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute a letter of intent to add projects to the scope of the Ozark Center Transportation Development District.
Okay, Jeremy, are you there?
I think that's me.
Steve, all right. No, that's, oh, I see. Okay, Steve.
Yes, so the Ozark Center Transportation Development District, I think we're all aware of where that is. That is the Transportation Development District that is out where Walmart and Lowe's is located. That is the Ozark Center. That Transportation Development District was established back in September of 2003. And since that time, the sales tax rate that was originally established at 3/8 cents was raised to 1%. Since that time also, the revenue that's been generated from the Ozark Center, which is doing very well, has moved faster than they had anticipated as far as being able to pay off the original bond debt that was borrowed by the developer and reimbursed by the Transportation Development District. Now, when the Transportation Development District is about to expire, it's very common for the developers of that area, as well as the Transportation Development Board, to seek opportunity to find new projects, new eligible projects, which have to go towards transportation improvements and those things associated with transportation improvements within that district area. Because of that, the Transportation Development District is approaching the City of Ozark, which is the local transportation authority, and seeking to accomplish 3 items. They're going to increase the access to and from the district. They want to improve traffic circulation within and around the district, and they want to facilitate development of the property adjacent to the district. The reason why this is being supported by the City of Ozark staff, and I know that we've talked about this numerous times, is that the Ozark Center is the largest retail driver of the city of Ozark and accounts for over 50% of the total revenue for this local economy. This is unique, but it's also time sensitive. And what I mean by that is that because the revenue has performed well, the timeline for paying off the original bond debt was expedited. And now we are running out of time, or the development district is running out of time to be able to add new projects to the list. So in working with the developers, the City of Ozark's Department of Public Works has put together a list of those projects that would be acceptable to the City of Ozark as the Transportation Authority. And the developer just wants to make sure that as the Transportation Authority, if they're going to go forward and expand and improve the retail center called Ozark Center in the City of Ozark, that they have the support of the City of Ozark. They want to know that. So that's what this ordinance is. It's a letter of intent. This is the first step towards entering into a developer's agreement, which will come back to the City of Ozark for your consideration. So this letter of intent allows for the developer to move forward and put in place the process they need to, because in order for projects to be added to a transportation development district, they have to go back and they have to put that to the vote of the property owners that are within that district. We do have a representative, a legal representative from the Ozark Center Transportation Development District. That's Mr. Rob Preston, who is on the screen. And Rob and myself and Ms. Calloway have been working together on this to put this letter of intent together, bring this to you for your consideration. And Rob, if you'd like to add anything to what I just said, please, by all means, go ahead. Or if anybody has any questions for Rob, he's on the line.
Yeah, Steve, I think you summed it up very nicely. The district, of course, views the city as a strong development partner. And before taking a step to move forward with some additional projects, Steve indicated at the end of the process, there is a transportation project agreement or redevelopment agreement that the developer and the district and the city would enter into concerning completion of the roads to ensure they're up to city specifications, as well as the ultimate dedication of those roads to the city, to the extent any of them are of the variety that would be dedicated to and accepted by the city. So before doing the heavy lifting and moving forward, we wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page so that we could move forward quickly once we started in earnest.
Anybody?
All right. Any questions or comments from the board of either Mr. Preston or Mr. Childers?
I do, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. Poston.
So my question is about the two project funds, the
Yes, sir.
Project A and the Project B. It's just kind of looking at this from my perspective, we're paying 70% into B and 30% into A, and B is going to pay in first. It's the first money in, first money out, if I'm reading this right.
Actually, the transportation, you are correct. There's going to be two funds, and Fund A and Fund B. Fund A will be at, like you said, 30%, Fund B at 70%. And if you look at the project list, both funds will be funded at the same time. So the Transportation Development District, Rob, I think it generates about $1.1 million a year.
That's about right.
I believe that's right. And so what you're looking at is 70% of that will go into Fund B, because that project is going to start immediately. So that's about $700,000, and about $300,000, I'm just rounding numbers, will go into Fund A to begin to build those projects that the City of Ozark will be responsible for taking on. That will be the basically the improvement of the intersection and the signalization. Those are over 15 years old, all the boxes there and the components in there, bringing everything up in the area to ADA standards, adding sidewalks and pedestrian components, also being able to go back in, and Mr. Parsons, you might be able to add something to this, but going back in and taking care of the roads. We've been struggling, as you well know, to be able to find a way to replace the roads once they get to 15 years old, 15, 20 years old. This will provide a revenue mechanism to be able to go back into that district that was established to be able to replace those roads, mill and overlay those. So it's a very extensive list of items that the city also has, but the developer is bringing new projects to the area. And so they are actually, if this is approved in the developer's agreement, which is the second step, this will give them, as Rob said, this will give them the assurance they need to go forward with the heavy lifting, file this in the courts where it has to be filed so that the vote can take place of the property owners. And so that's this first step. And so, yes, it is 70-30, but that's only because that the new development project is going to be where the bulk of the bonds, I guess you would say, are going to be leveraged to pay for that infrastructure. So that's why it's going to that first to pay that off.
The follow-up to the question I was trying to get is that, so in Fund B, there's two projects listed. One of them is $6.7 million for the construction of public residential streets. And the rest of it for sidewalks and fixing the roads that are already there and the signals, as you mentioned, looks like to be about around $2 million, give or take. So 2 million is going into A for a whole host of stuff, and 6.7 million is going into build residential streets.
Going in to build residential streets and those things, the stormwater that's associated with those streets. Now, part of that is not just residential streets. There are other upgrades to a secondary collector, primary collector, the collector roads that feed that. So not just residential streets within a new development, but also the collector roads that feed those. And the reason why that staff was supportive of this, and we went back and we modified, remember, this was 100% on the developer until we split it up to 70-30, because once the project B is satisfied and those debts are satisfied, which is estimated to be 6 to 8 years, then the remaining amount of money goes into Fund A, which will be 100%. Now the city can do more of those projects that it needs to do. Now, you would obviously have to go back if there are new projects to the Transportation Development District. The Transportation Development District will be the manager, if you will, of both of the funds, because they are the holders of the funds, the receivers of the funds. And then based on these lists, those lists can be expanded as well at the request of the city as approved by the Transportation Development District. But 100% of that could go towards those public improvements as well.
I have no problems with TDDs. I have no problems with what's been going on over there. And as you mentioned, that section of town's critical economically, but I do have some concerns about $6.7 million being used to build residential streets, not commercial, not something that we're all going to benefit from, but residential streets. I don't have a problem with approving a letter of intent to let everybody know that we're on board, that we want to work together. I do have a problem with this breakdown such as it is. But I think that's something we can work out between now and the final agreement. Or no?
Well, I would probably say no. I mean, this is the second agreement. We brought forward the first agreement that was proposed was 100%. We went back after meeting with the Board of Alderman and worked out the deal of 70-30, knowing that the 30 would become 100% once the project B was done. Because the fact of the matter is if this is the deal and if it doesn't happen, now the city of Ozark has no means to be able to go in and pay for repairing streets, making pedestrian sidewalks, bringing things up to ADA standards, fixing the lights. We have no money for that. So if it wasn't for this is the funding mechanism to take care of the #1 retail driver that you have for the next 20 years. Otherwise, there is no way to do that.
At current revenue rates, how long would it take to satisfy the 6.7?
6 years.
Steve,
But in that same time frame, Fund A would, based on estimates, Fund A would have generated $1.8 million. So your Fund A that you're using to be able to catch up to all that maintenance that we're going to be behind on, if we're not already behind on, you've got that $1.8 million that's sitting there in Fund A. to be able to start tackling those things in the south side that we've all agreed we want to do to try to keep the south side supported, while that other debt is being paid off on Plan B. So again, even though it looks a little lopsided, after that 6 years, we're still going to have $1.8 million in Fund A. But after that 6 years, now you have 100% of the proceeds going to Fund A, which now you can go back and say, what other projects do we need to do in the eligible area of the Ozark Center TDD to be able to improve other collectors?
Let me ask a question, Steve. As I read this, Fund B isn't just for the interior residential streets, it's the collector too, also.
Yeah,
And that's something that we don't have now and need to have, and that's going to allow us to expand further south in the future.
correct. If you don't take the major collector that's satisfying the new subdivision to come down all the way to the south, as in the map represents, as we've talked about, then you don't have the ability to extend to the east and the west and even further to the south, where we're trying to bring all that into the Ozark Center to help it continue to prosper.
Yeah, because Alderman Poston, I was concerned when we first started having these discussions that it was pretty lopsided. But the city feels the need to develop a connection further south and even to go over to Selmore Road. And I believe that's 19th Street, isn't it, Steve? That goes between the two. I'm pretty sure it is. And right now that would allow for the improvement of that, which is the collector. So it's not all the interior residential streets. It's the collector that will allow us to go further south, which we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So that was why I
It
felt
serves as the sort of the spine to everything else.
that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
It is the spine. It will eventually allow us to, at some point, make connections into Oak Hill. And I see it into Oak Hill and further to Selmore. Mr. Flores.
My only question is there a specific reason why all of Fund B has to be paid in full before Fund A starts getting anything? If it's 70-30, I realize it's of the whole amount to be collected, but is there a specific reason why it's not being collected on that throughout the entire time frame, and it's specifically 70% being filled in full, and then we start collecting on the 30%?
No, it's actually going to be 70-30 from the very beginning. So
okay, so it'll be collected that way throughout the entire time.
Yeah, both funds are going to be funded from the beginning at the same time. There would just be one funded at 70%, one funded at 30%, because the initial $6.5 million is going to be the first amount of money that's borrowed. And so that is going to be the debt that needs to be paid off. So that's why that fund is heavier from the get-go. But both will be funded at the same time, just in those two different percentages.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions of Alderman? Okay.
I'm going to ask
A couple of things I can note as well, just about TDDs in general, that the funds that are collected are not city funds. Unlike a tax increment financing or some other incentive mechanisms, no existing city tax dollars will be diverted from the city or other taxing jurisdictions. This is just funds raised by the district to be used for transportation projects. So I just wanted to make clear that these weren't otherwise city funds that the district has, but it's its own money.
Right. I think we understand that. I want to make sure that before we go forward, that there are no further questions. This appears to be an opportunity for both the developer, but especially the city. And we want to make sure that everybody understands. So, Mr. Smith, is there a need to expedite this?
Yes, I've been requested to do so.
All right.
So I'm going to place Bill 3176 on its second reading by title and description only, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Alderman Poston, a motion made by Smith, seconded by Poston and several others. Thank you. To put Bill 3176 on its second reading by title only. All in favor? Okay, Ms. Callaway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute a letter of intent to add projects to the scope of the Ozark Center Transportation Development District.
All right, any further questions? If not, Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Honor. I move that we place we adopt Bill 3176 as ordinance 20-053.
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Smith and seconded by Alderman Poston to adopt Bill 3176 as ordinance 20-053. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Schaper,
Aye.
Alderman Smith,
Aye.
Alderman Alder,
Aye.
Alderman Galloway,
Aye.
Alderman Nathan Poston,
Aye.
and Alderman Flores.
Aye.
Thank you,
Okay.
Janet.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Galloway.
Yes, Your Honor. I move that we place bill number 3177 on its first reading by title only. Second.
Motion made by Alderman Galloway and seconded by Alderman Smith. Put Bill 3177 on its first reading. All in favor? Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley for professional engineering services related to the Chadwick Flyer Trail.
Okay, Steve.
This one's gonna be Jeremy, I think.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is the next step in the Chadwick Flyer. As you all know, we were awarded the grant late last year with the OTO, and our fellow members helped award that grant. We are now in the design phase. This particular engineer also designed the improvements on Jackson Street. And we felt like there was certainly some economies of scale there. There was a lot of data that they could utilize with the Chadwick Flyer as well. So Cochran Engineering, who is usually our engineer on projects such as this, I'm thankful to say that we've got a great relationship with them, and they said, please don't let us stand in the way of allowing CMT to do this, because it just makes more sense financially. So we're having to go out for this contract and get approval of this contract simply because CMT is not our third-party engineer. But so that sums it up in a nutshell. It's basically the next step. This will design the Chadwick Flyer all the way from the school property to Clay Street on about 4,000 feet north of Jackson. And if you have any questions specific to the design, just let me know.
All right, any questions or comments from Mr. Parsons?
I've got one. Just
Yes.
Not about the bill specifically, but about the Chadwick Flyer. I've sat with Bruce on that, on that steering committee, and what Ozark Greenways has done, what Jeremy has done is fantastic. This is, I don't know how long it'll take us to make this a reality, but this is a very exciting project.
Any further comments? All right, is there any need to expedite this, or can we carry that over?
We can carry this over.
All right, we will carry 3177 over to the next meeting. All right, 3178, Mr. Galloway.
Your Honor, I move we place bill number 3178 on its first reading by title only.
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Galloway and seconded by Alderman Poston to put Bill 3178 on its first reading. Favor? Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Morlock Properties Incorporated for cost-sharing sewer improvements.
Okay, Steve.
Okay, just like you saw with the Transportation Development District question, many times the City of Ozark and the developers must find ways and or recognize opportunities when there is a mutual benefit involved. I do recognize that the developer's representative, Frank Schwartz, is on the screen. Hi, Frank. We'll get to you in just a minute, and I know probably have some questions, but I'll go ahead and explain. So some of you may recognize this area and also recognize the nature of this agreement, because you had previously approved a sewer reimbursement agreement for this subdivision or these future phases in this particular area. Back a couple of years ago, this was put in place and everybody was moving forward. And of course, the economy, sometimes there's ebbs and flows. You have, peaks and valleys in your real estate market. Well, as we moved forward, the original agreement said that the developer, the city would get all of the easements and the developer would therefore build the off-site improvements. I want to make that point clear. These are off-site sewer improvements. These are not on the developer's property. The city went out and we got the easements. We retained those, but as time passed, the improvements had simply just not been necessary to be done by the time that the future phases needed to be completed. Now we're to that point where the future phases were to be completed and we found that the agreement had expired. Be that as it may, we worked with the developer to dive back into the agreement and found really what we all feel is a much better way to move forward. Since that time, the city of Ozark has acquired the necessary training, the necessary equipment to be able to do water and sewer projects of this nature on our own. And so now the way that the agreement is set up is that the developer, the city will actually do the work in the easements that we have retained. That will allow for the city to therefore have gravity in that area, improving the entire sewer system. We will take a lift station offline, which is always a cost savings to the citizens, and it will actually provide more capacity in the area for an additional amount of land around the subdivision to actually have sewer service. But the benefit to that is now that the city is doing that, the developer is just going to simply write a check to say, you know what, you can go do the off-site improvements. All we want to do is plat our property and build our houses. So it's actually going to work off well. Instead of waiting for each one of the permits to come in to receive that sewer reimbursement, the developer is going to simply write a check for that up front, and then any additional connections will be dealt with as it goes forward. And we don't know that there will be additional connections. We simply, as you can see on the map, there's just a drainage area that this particular improvement encompasses that could potentially someday connect to that. We just don't know that. So right now, this is for the River Point subdivision, for it to continue to finish out its phases. Frank, I hope I didn't make that more confusing than it needed to be. If you have any questions, again, Frank Schwartz is on the line and he can represent the developer.
Go ahead, Mr. Schwartz.
Glad to be with you this evening. As Steve said, all the details of the sewer agreement have been carefully worked out between the city of Ozark and Morlock Builders to be able to add a total of up to 153 new residential rooftops to the city of Ozark, of which 73 will be the Morlock Builders River Point Phase 2 subdivision. We are ready to begin as soon as the agreement is in place. Our contribution is just slightly less than half, so about $109,738 to the sewer improvement project. And that payment will be made to the city within 30 days of receiving an invoice. We are eager to get underway with our infrastructure development and respectfully request the agreement be accepted to the mutual benefit of both parties as the agreement is written. I'm open for questions.
All right, any questions of Mr. Schwartz?
No, I have one question.
Yes.
Mr. Parsons.
All right, Mr. Parsons.
Or
Mr.
maybe-
Parsons.
It could be Mr. Parker.
Well,
Yeah.
or even perhaps even Mr. Childers. I was curious about the lift station. What lift station is coming offline?
That's known as the Pintail Lift Station. That's a lift station located in the primarily on the west side of both Waterford and the rivers. It currently collects the majority of those subdivisions and then pumps back around and falls to the southwest, which goes through the neighborhoods of just to the east of Turnberry. So as Steve said, this is one of those situations where anytime we can rely on gravity as opposed to lift stations, it is a win for the city. Also, the whole opportunity that we have here to self-perform this, now that our crew has got the appropriate equipment and everything in place, this saves the city a tremendous amount of money. And then to have a partner on top of that is kind of the icing on the cake. So we're very excited about getting this lift station offline.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any further questions from staff? Mr. Schwartz or staff? All right, is there a need to expedite this?
I don't believe so.
All right. I hate to expedite anything that we don't have to, so we will hold this one over to the next meeting. Okay, we're now to the point of the meeting that everybody's been waiting for. Second reading bills, and we have a discussion in front of us on Bill 3170 on the so-called mask ordinance. There has been possibly or potentially some confusion as to what our options are tonight. And some of those may have been created by me in discussing amendments with a couple of aldermen that they might want to bring forth. And so before we go forward, I've asked our city attorney, Amanda Calloway, to kind of explain where we are with this and what our options, if any, are going forward. So before we read the bill, Ms. Calloway?
Yes. Pursuant to the authority delegated to the mayor in the ordinance number 2017, he continues to have the authority to amend which public gatherings in number and in type, which may be prohibited or allowed if after consulting with the appropriate local, community, city, county, or state officials, and in his judgment, if it is needed to protect the public health. So that is to say, the mayor still holds the delegated authority that was given to him back in March to put in place orders that would restrict gatherings, and an ordinance related to face coverings or an order related to face coverings would be an expression of that authorized authority. If the ordinance is amended at this reading and it's a substantive amendment, that will require a second first reading of the bill, which will be open to public comment, only to speak to the actual amendments. So that would hold it over to September 8th, which is the following meeting. Does anyone have any questions related to that?
Let me explain how this came up. In talking with Alderman through the week, there was some comment, some opinion that there were portions of this ordinance that might not be ideal. That wasn't my idea necessarily, but it became clear that there might be some amendments that somebody would want to make, because if you all will remember, when we brought this ordinance up, it was my idea several weeks ago to get this elephant out of the room and on the table. And Mr. Poston was in supportive of a mask ordinance. So I asked him to sponsor that. Wasn't that I was necessarily in favor or opposed. I just felt that we needed to discuss it. So in the process of doing that, Ms. Calloway brought forth a draft ordinance. And it was exactly what we asked her to do. And she did that in concert with the city attorney at Nixa. And it's my understanding that this concept or this ordinance, that this draft that we read and discussed last week is basically the same thing that Nixa did. So it wasn't, it was put together by our city attorney at our request, and it was intended to be a draft. In looking at it closely this last week, I was asked some questions by one of the aldermen and as to exactly what this particular part of it meant. And the thought came up that, well, maybe we needed to amend it. And so I talked to Amanda, and she said, well, you can amend it, but you won't be able to vote on it tonight. And I know that we want to get this taken care of, so to speak. We want to deal with it, not trying to kick the can down the road, as we've said before on some things. So I wanted everybody to understand that while you may feel an amendment is necessary or desirable, that's perfectly fine. But then that amendment would have to be put on its first reading at the next meeting, which is the 8th of September. It could be expedited and it could be read and then it could modify the ordinance, but then we would not be able to vote on this ordinance for the second reading until that first meeting in September. So I guess the question is, do we want to deal with the ordinance exactly the way it's written and pass it, fail it, table it, whatever the options are? Do we want to do that tonight? Ms. Callaway, you have your hand up. Did I say that wrong? Can't hear you. There you go. Ms. Callaway, we can.
I was just going to clarify in simpler terms that if there were concerns related to additional exceptions, this ordinance has been drafted so that it can continue to be modified through the power that's delegated to the mayor, because some situations such as a pandemic may create some unknowns, and there may be a need for the mayor to make additional exceptions. And so that was included in this ordinance, much like it was already included in the delegation of the authority to the mayor to make restrictions or exceptions related to the closure of public gatherings.
Okay, that we're not trying to make this more complicated. Just want everybody to understand what our options are. And I failed to explain that right. You did clarify that because you explained that to me this afternoon, Amanda. But apparently the first order that was done back in March gave me the right to make changes in consultation with, I mean, it could be a verbal consultation with the Board of Aldermen, with the city staff, of things that came up that were necessary. I have already done some of those as we've kind of come out of the lockdown. But that would, according to Ms. Callaway, that has not gone away. I was not aware of that. So, and in talking with Mr. Smith earlier in the week, there's one of these exceptions that gave the mayor the right to make changes that he thought maybe that should be removed. I'm fine with that if that's the practical thing to do. But as Ms. Callaway explained, there may be need for us to take some things, take some additional actions that you would want the mayor to make in consultation with you all. Now, did I explain that right, Ms. Callaway? You need to clarify that again.
That was substantively accurate, yes.
Everybody here is chuckling at your remark and my attempt to explain that.
It is just I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
It is just to say that removal of that one subsection would in effect not do a whole lot, because you have already been delegated the authority to make restrictions, including requiring face coverings. So through that authority you've been delegated, you could act because that authority has been given to you through December 31st.
Okay, so now what we have is an opportunity to pass or fail this ordinance. And what I have talked with several of you about, Mr. Smith, I didn't see you had your hand up. Go ahead.
I've got probably 3 questions, most of them probably for the city attorney. Help me to understand again, in the past, when an audit person has brought forth an amendment, we've either had if we had a second, we took a vote that night on the amendment. But did I hear the mayor and you correctly that if we asked for an amendment tonight, it would not be voted on until September?
No, if there's an amendment proposed tonight by an alderman and that amendment by motion passes, then the bill itself has been amended and the whole bill will come forward for a first reading, which will be on September 8th. And at that public hearing, that will be open to public comment, but it's limited by your own ordinances only to that amendment.
Okay, that's the way I thought I understood it, but I thought I heard something a little differently there. Okay, question number 2. If section 2BK, I think I'm correct, was amended to be stricken, am I understanding you from the previous order that we did back in March, that doesn't really matter because the mayor still has the prerogative to do what he wants?
Essentially, yes. So I worked on drafting this order in conjunction with our regional partners because we wanted to have a regional answer that was consistent because our boundaries are traveled by many of our constituents. So their ordinance went forward first, and their original order was not identical to ours. Our order granted that authority to the mayor. Theirs did not do it the same way. So that provision was left in there, and I think it's a good provision, but I think the way that the original order would operate, since it allows him to take a much stricter action to close public gatherings, he can also make lesser restrictive actions in addition to adding exceptions or requiring face coverings. So he has already been delegated that authority. So an amendment to remove that section would be a moot point, essentially, in my opinion.
Okay, then third question. The school's mask policy is less restrictive than ours is. If we pass this tonight, then as it's written, without additional mayor prerogative, we would force the school to be as restrictive as we are, comma.
If this is a
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
If this is a procedural question, I can address that related to this ordinance. If this is related to the substance of the ordinance, I would encourage us to go ahead and you can ask, board members may ask me questions related to that item.
Well, let me, okay, I think it's procedural because I'm trying to understand from the, and if I'm wrong, you tell me and I will be silent, okay? I think it's procedural, but if I'm wrong, you tell me. Specifically, where it deals with athletics, ours says you can take off your mask during sports as long as you maintain 6 foot distance. The schools is less restrictive. They've exempted athletics and activities, okay? So if we pass this tonight, under that section 2BK or whatever it is, or whatever prior ruling we did, procedurally, would the mayor, and again, I'm not picking on the mayor, I'm just saying anybody sitting in that seat, doesn't matter. Would the mayor, if he so chose to, exempt school, would it be specific that he would have to exempt school athletics? Or would he exempt the school from having to follow this ordinance? If that's procedural, again, if I'm not, then you're the attorney, correct me, and I will shut up.
This seems to be related to the same procedural question related to how the mayor's authority would work. So I can answer your question. Under the proposed ordinance and our already existing ordinance that granted him that authority, the mayor could grant additional exceptions to the masking order.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fourth question. And I
I
told you I had a
agree.
bunch, I apologize. Can I have 4?
Sure.
Okay, I will end at 4. I will end at 4. Fourth question. If, and again, I'm going to ask this from a legal perspective, and again, if this is not the right forum, tell me, okay? If we exempted it, using that same example, school athletics, if we exempted it and the CDC says that's a highest risk in their category of youth sports, is close contact sports from teams outside of your city or county, would we, the city, incur liability by doing that? If there's an incident in that arena?
I'm not sure that question's related to the procedural issue. And it seems to be more directly related to the bill, but I don't have an answer for you on that.
Well, let me chime in on that because that is one of the things that I was not satisfied with as I thought more about it in this particular draft bill. I have absolutely no intention of putting any restrictions on the schools. I think all of us would agree that we did not agree with the appropriateness of them questioning our ability to set fees and inspections. They don't know the city as well as we know the city, and we certainly don't know how to do school. And I do not want to put us in a position of dictating to them. So if you all want to not amend that and go forward with this, tomorrow morning, I would have Amanda draft an order that would eliminate schools from the definition of public accommodation and any other places that would give this bill any authority over them, because I don't think it's appropriate. Now,
I would strongly encourage that we go ahead and read this bill into the second reading and then follow the rules of order.
right, okay, I understand.
I'm sorry, rules of order would follow, we'd read the bill and then we would offer amendments?
Yes, first, what will happen is it will be read a second time. Then the sponsor of the bill may speak to it. Then anyone in favor may speak to it, limited to the board. Then anyone opposed to it may speak to it. And the rules state that you may speak only one time until everyone has had an opportunity to speak, and then you may speak a second time.
But what point though, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what point there is the amendment? What order, did I miss that?
You can make a motion. You can make a motion at any time, but it would seem.
What Amanda is saying is that we need to read the bill. We need to put it on the floor. Right now, I probably started this by making comments and you had questions on her explanation, and we need to put the bill on the floor, and the sponsor will have, Mr. Poston will have the first right to speak in favor of it. And then we'll hear everybody else that wants to speak in favor of it. And then we will hear those people that want to be opposed to it. And everybody can speak 2 times, but you can't speak your second time until everybody that wants to speak the first time has spoken. So I think Amanda's right. This discussion is not appropriate at this point. And that's as much my fault as anything, because we've just never waded through this water before. And so Amanda has explained what is available. Where we are right now, Mr. Poston, is that we need to get this bill on the floor.
Your Honor, I move that we place Bill 3170 on its second reading.
Motion made by Alderman Poston and seconded by Alderman Galloway to put Bill 3170 on its second reading by title only. Ms. Galloway. All in favor, yes. I think all are in favor. All right, go ahead, Ms. Galloway.
An ordinance of the City of Ozark, Missouri, establishing a requirement for the use of face coverings to prevent or limit the spread of COVID-19.
All right, according to our 5-year-old set of procedures, which we reviewed this week, the sponsor has the first right. So Mr. Poston, your comments come first.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, since we've been talking about the schools here a little bit, I'm going to start with that. Dr. Baumann came last week.
I can't hear Nathan. I can't hear you.
What was that on? I said, Dr. Baumann came last week and spoke in support of this. I think it's important to remind everyone that Dr. Baumann, as the school superintendent, is the CEO of the largest employer in Ozark and the chief caregiver and educator for 6,000 of our kids. When the schools go back into session, we haven't done anything like it yet, not during COVID. We have not had the community connected in the way that it's about to be. If the school goes down, it would not be outside the realm of possibility, if the school has to close, to say that it could take the economy with it. And I'm not talking about teachers getting laid off, because a lot of them are probably gonna go to doing some online form of education. But lunch people, administrators, custodial staff, bus drivers, bus tires, how much oil do we use in changing oils in those buses every year? How much fuel? How many contracts does the school have that are only fulfilled if the school is in session? You will take millions of dollars out of this economy if the school has to close down. I think that ought to be one of our top priorities, is to keep that school open. It is a central tenet of our community that children have a safe place to go. If the school shuts down, I don't know what happens to all those kids that are too young to stay home. Are parents going to now quit their jobs? Are they going to go out of pocket to hire educators and babysitters? I know that, Dr. Baumann brought this up the other day. It's probably not the most popular thing to call a school, but for all of the services that the school provides, an incredibly large daycare is one of them. And I'm not sure what happens when 6,000 kids don't have a place to go. There was a lot of talk about this ordinance and, having the mayor have some additional authority. That was intentional. I wanted that flex. I did not realize that was already covered by the previous order itself, but that's great. I think we want that. We have talked during COVID a lot about the ability to be responsive, to be flexible, to react to what's going on. And that's exactly what this bill does. I talked to Miss Davis, the owner of the vineyard. She called this weekend. We talked quite a bit. She had a lot of good ideas and questions about some private groups and things of that nature. I think there are conversations there worth continuing. I think there are more conversations to be had about how we handle this, how we educate people about this. I think there's a lot to be done in that arena. But to continue, we should have done this a month ago, guys. A month ago. On March 12th, the President of the United States issued an emergency declaration. There were 1,645 confirmed cases of COVID in the United States. That same day, Governor Parsons followed it, and shortly thereafter, the county commission unanimously issued those orders, as did this board, unanimously. 1,645 cases. I think we're at 5.5 million now with 170,000 dead. I am not in a position where I'm going to throw up my hands and say, I'm done, come and take me. I'm not doing it. I'm going to fight for this community. I'm going to push back against this disease at every turn I can. The public has a right to be reasonably safe in the public space. The CDC, the WHO, the Greene County Health Department, the Christian County Health Department, Cox, Mercy, all say that we are not reasonably safe, and that is supported by emergency orders from the president, the governor, the county commission, and this board. Not once has any alderman brought forth an order, or a bill rather, to withdraw the emergency order. Nobody said we're good. Let's call it a day. We want to keep that emergency order in place, and then we want to not take any proactive measure. That's not me. I clearly feel pretty strongly about this. I feel that I have a duty to act on the best advice that I can get to protect the health of the public. I do also recognize a distinction between personal responsibility and the public health. I know after the last meeting, I had a lot of emails, I'm sure you all did too, saying that this person or that person, somebody that night didn't handle their mask correctly. And now they messed it up. They didn't handle their mask correctly, and now they have put themselves at risk. That's possible. That may very well be true. But if that's true, the person that is at risk is the person that made the mistake. And that's personal responsibility. You suffering the consequences of your actions. But everybody in that room was masked that night, and that's public health, and that's good public policy. And I have absolutely no problem with that. That's all the comments I'm going to make. I'm sure I will have some more for round two, but that's all I have for right now, Your Honor.
All right, are there any other aldermen that would like to speak in favor of this at this point? Mr. Galloway?
Thank you. For me, this is simply a public health issue. The governor instituted emergency orders, or an emergency order that activated some statutes that affect the county health departments across the state. And acting according to the governor's order, Dr. Karen Peak requested that the city of Ozark pass a mask ordinance. And she did so on the grounds that as a matter of public health, we needed it. That's when it came to us on August 4. So we held a meeting and there were two representatives of two institutions that serve our community. One is Cox Health System, which is a regional healthcare provider. Cox Health System's CEO has been not shy in stating he believes it's critical for the region that the counties surrounding Greene County enact mask ordinances in addition to Greene County. He has stated that 65% of the coronavirus patients that are hospitalized come from outside of Greene County. So the counties surrounding where his hospital is, are very important in their calculus. Cox Health System sent Dr. Trotman, who is a trained epidemiologist. He presented the majority scientific view. The majority scientific view is widespread use of masks reduce the transmission of this disease. There is a minority point of view that we also heard that night, which I'll get into, that says that's not true, but the majority position in the scientific community is that it's not even close. In fact, Steve Edwards had stated that they weren't imposing masks in their hospital system when the crisis began, and had all manner of transmission amongst their staff, and they quickly instituted mask requirements, and it reduced it substantially to where I think there's maybe two. I don't quote me on that, but it was very, very low. And of course, as a matter of common sense, it would make sense that masks combined with hand washing, social distancing would reduce. So that was the majority view that was presented. But for us, the public health question is, do we enact a policy? Do we enact an ordinance? He spoke to that directly. He said in his industry, they look at three things, and among those was the benchmark of positivity, or a benchmark of a 20% positivity frequency on positives. In his industry, that is accepted, or 10% is accepted as you have a major problem brewing. There is a monster swimming in the ocean right underneath you, would be another way to put it. And I had not heard, read, or had been presented by anybody from that industry that benchmark is not generally accepted. In fact, from what I've seen, that does seem to be a policy point. Dr. Trotman stated for Christian County, the positivity rate is 20%, which is twice the benchmark. He also stated that he looked at the jump in recent positives, and is well understood that positives are not by themselves an accurate statement of specific qualities of the epidemic. He wasn't making that statement. What he was saying is just the significance was the jump in numbers, and it's been jumping since he's talked. That is something in his industry that he looks at. And I have not heard from any other industry spokesman that it isn't appropriate to look at that. And as a matter of common sense, it seems to me that that would be appropriate. The last thing that he looked at was hospitalization rate, historical hospitalization rate in the fall. And whether, even with the massive preparations that they've made for COVID, whether they would be under threat. And he was very specific that the data that he had matched with the benchmark, what the significance of the benchmark being exceeded, and by the jumping rate of positives in Christian County and other counties, that they would be at serious risk of being, I don't know if you use the word overwhelmed, but they would be in a great deal of trouble. Well, that was one industry person whose statements were not refuted, whose statements seem to be borne out by general consensus in America. There are minority points of views, but I don't make decisions based on minority expert points of views. I want the best kind, and I'm more interested in what a local person says than opposed to somebody from somewhere else. Now, the second institution that was represented at our public hearing was the public school. And the public school, that was Dr. Baumann. He's very similar to Dr. Trotman and of course, Mr. Edwards, in that he has a high level of education in his field and a great deal of experience. In addition, Dr. Baumann has military experience, which means to say that he has a great deal of organizational experience. He said that they undertook exceptional measures to make their institution more safe. These measures included mass restrictions. They are not a total ban, but they were tailor-made for their specific situation, where they have, for example, classrooms where there are maybe 6 or so kids in the classroom, and they are spread out 6 feet or more away from one another, where the teacher may have has the discretion to keep them without masks. But in general, they have a mask mandate in that they have imposed substantial restrictions. They have also done something exceptional, which was to set up PVC and plastic drop plastic cubicles for the students, which is not scientifically supported, but I think they find precedents. He didn't say this, but they find precedents in other countries. But the point is they were making exceptional decisions. The other thing that he said was they were going to keep the schools open 5 days a week. Now that is quite exceptional. That is not what Springfield is doing. I think they are at 2 days. His is 5 days. I didn't query him about that, but I am aware that our governor has said that is exactly what he wanted to see done. So we have a person that is following what the governor said you should be doing if you're a school. And in fact, it's also, as Mr. Poston touched on, incredibly important for the economy. In addition to contractors that will lose out if school's not in session, if the schools close. Your workforce, if they're tied down with their kids, they're not working, they're also not earning as much money and they're not spending. But anyway, he said, we need the mask ordinance, the restrictions, we need you to support us. The criticisms there, the criticisms there were, well, Ozark shouldn't support the schools, I think, I'm paraphrasing. We shouldn't support them in their attempt to stay open 5 days a week because they allow contact sports to be maskless. Well, that is a bit of hyperbole, isn't it? That's a bit much to swallow. If we are enforcing a mask mandate and we are at compliance rates, and the school has restrictions all through their buildings, and if we disagree that they will follow, by the way, they are not unregulated, they will follow MHSAA regulations on contact sports. So they do have regulations. It's not like anybody who's a football player doesn't get to wear a mask. No, it's limited to certain situations, including playing. If we disagree with, or if that happens, our whole town is doomed. Well, we haven't heard anybody say that that's the case. Nobody has said that. The CDC has said that it's high risk for towns to come in from other geographic areas to play. But we are talking about in the context of a community of 20,000 all wearing masks and a limited time. It may be unwise, I don't know. But it is not doomed the whole effort. It is not at all a reason to vote against this, that the school will follow MHSAA sporting policies. This goes along with the mayor's reticence that he expressed in getting involved at all in the regulation of schools. They have federal and state mandates that we know nothing about, and we do not want to know. And they have their own board, and these are not wild-eyed liberals that are running their board at all, who unanimously put in these mask restrictions. And I go back to the school administration has said to us, we need you as a community to pass this. Two institutions that our citizens rely upon came to us and their representatives and said, this isn't close for us. In our trade, we've already determined these things work. We've also are relying on data that we need as a community to pass this. So those were the proponents of us taking on a mask restricting ordinance as a way of affecting public policy in a pandemic. So then you look at, well, how out of the norm is this ask? How strange is this? Are our local school officials and board, are they absolutely crazy? Are they just out there not paying attention to the world? What about Cox? I mean, are other public entities buying this, what they're selling, that this is good public policy to enact mask restrictions? Well, as it turns out, the majority of states have passed statewide mask restrictions. These are not states, all of them, states that we would describe as being outwardly strange in how they view politics. And I hate to use that word in a public health discussion, to be honest with you. Kentucky, Arkansas, Mississippi, North Carolina, Texas are among the 34 states that looked at this and said, this is acceptable public, or this is acceptable policy to help their communities and their peoples, their schools and their health institutions manage the next few months of this pandemic. So as it turns out, no, the people who came to us with this idea are not way out. No, as it turns out, it's the majority view of the states in this country. It is the view of Springfield, Greene County, Branson, and Taney County. But it was also a nationwide, widely held nationwide view. So that's something you can pay attention to when you're here at the City of Ozark without a degree in epidemiology. But having been informed by an epidemiologist, which not very many towns get that opportunity, and they're asking for us to do something that others have passed on and said, yep, this is the right way to go. Now, now we go to this ordinance. Is our ordinance, is this going to be a good policy for the City of Ozark? Will it meet the needs? And the answer is yes. The policy is a citywide restriction. It does not enter back offices where we can't enter anyway without search warrants, and don't want to, believe me. It is applicable to children, but children 10 and over. There maybe you can say, well, the CDC has just came out yesterday or this weekend saying they changed their viewpoint, and children do seem to be a major source of transmission. Trotman had said in his statement a week before that teens are by far more likely to transmit. So we would fit within scope. It's reasonable. We're not going to have a perfect ordinance, but it's reasonable. And compliance is much more reasonable. And then we have a delegation to the mayor who has shown himself, I know personally, shown himself during the stay-at-home orders to be flexible in how he applied it to industries that were affected and said, hey, had you thought about this? In fact, I think I've had a conversation or two with the mayor about it, and he said, yes, you're right. And that is something else that I think we can consider is we've been down this road already, and our mayor has shown himself to listen very carefully to how this policy that we enacted can still be in effect if it's fine-tuned to certain business, certain kinds of businesses, not individual businesses, certain kinds of businesses. That's important to me. It's important to me that he has that flexibility built in, even if it exists as a standalone elsewhere. And that means that there are businesses that would be impacted may have workarounds that can help them financially make it through this. I don't have an exhaustive list of who will be impacted by a mask ordinance. Obviously, from my walking around Walmart and Lowe's, it's not retail. I've heard from restaurant owners. I've heard from one or two who said, look, don't tell anybody who I am, but I'd like this passed because I'd like to insist on people wearing masks that come here. But by far, others have said we will be adversely impacted. And I'm not clear how mechanically that works out and why that would be. For example, one said, well, our staff won't like wearing masks and you know, those are the people I kind of want to wear masks. You know, they know their business just like Cox Health Systems knows its business and the school knows its business. So I assume that's probably true. I think wedding venues would be another thing impacted. And my point is, there's a safety valve built in. It's not an answer for every industry, but I imagine it will allow some light through. Now, on the ordinance, in terms of whether it gets the job done. Well, the major argument that I heard that it would not was the enforcement issue. I know this has been conceded by some, but I don't agree with it. I don't think there's been any evidence that has been presented to us that I've heard that there is an enforcement issue. Remember, we're not about enforcement on this ordinance, we're about compliance. And compliance is what works. Compliance saves schools and saves regional health systems. Finding people, I could care less about. Compliance is what we're after. The most significant thing I heard from Dr. Trotman, which has not been challenged by anybody that I've heard, was immediately after Springfield enacted the mask ordinance, they had a dramatic decline in transmission rates. Dramatic, immediately. That gives you an idea about the character of the people who live in Southwest Missouri. The character of the people that I choose to live with, and they are law-abiding people, and they will obey the law. Not all of them. Obviously, we have police for a reason, but most people here are law-abiding citizens, and they will agree to follow this. They already have in Springfield, and they already are. 80% of us are already commuting to Springfield. I haven't heard from Branson that they've had issues with compliance, and I would say they would have the heavier water to haul because they have tourists. Nobody has come to this board with evidence on compliance for Southwest Missouri. The evidence, in fact, has been that we comply. The other thing, economic impact, which we touched on. The concern that I have, if we don't have a mask ordinance and we do not have a reduction, is that the schools will close locally. That would be catastrophic to every industry in our area, every restaurant, every store, everybody would be hugely impacted by that. Everybody will be buoyed by the school if they're able to maintain their 5 days, or even if they're able to, or if they have to reduce to a hybrid. But their plan is, if they got a classroom, shut down the classroom. If they got a school, if they have to, shut down the school. But they have a plan to keep, which I listened to from Dr. Bowman, to keep that district going. That's important to me. That keeps people in business. That keeps people shopping and earning. That helps a lot more businesses that are impacted, and I hate that anybody is negatively impacted. I hate it, because I am friends with many. But many, many more will be uplifted. And then finally, let's just not forget that this is a public health policy we're discussing. I've listened to people on all sides, but I can tell you, although nobody speaks with one voice, there is a high-risk group that had a voice or has a voice, and that's Bill Aker. And he said that there are so many seniors hibernating because they're cautious about their health. Well, they should be. They're on the death list for this virus. It's not me. I'm not afraid of the virus. I would prefer not to have it. Some people have catastrophic consequences from it. No, I am concerned about people who are higher risk at a public health issue. And they are in our community. We chose to live in a community with them, and they chose to live with us. Many of them are hibernating in their homes, and they're not doing well mentally. But if we can break the back of the uprising trend of this pandemic, we do make it safer for them, and that is part of public health. And finally, let's not underestimate. When a regional health system says, look under our trade, how we look at things, not how the CPA looks at things, not how the lawyer looks at things, not how anybody else looks at things, but what we do in our business, how we look at things. He said that they would be adversely impacted. They wanted to slow it down. And that's the final thing that I want to say about all of this. There is no slippery slope here. There is only this issue that's before us, and that is, do we enact a mask ordinance as a matter of public health policy? Is this the right one? And the answer is, as I stated, is yes. And the thing that I look to, and I know there are no guarantees of it, but I think that we shouldn't just ignore the fact that there are 6 or 7 international companies, 2 that are in Great Britain and the United States, that have vaccines that are in the final stages of testing and are expected to be complete by January. They are already producing them in preparation in case they pass muster. I would hate for us to think that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, to accept, as Dr. Spangler had pointed or said, that vaccine is unnecessary. I don't think we've gotten to the point where we take up that minority view. I think that we're at the point where we can say, before we let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Let's delay this thing as we've been advised. Let's keep our schools going, keep our economy going. Let's protect our seniors. Let's protect our health institutions, because I believe that it is acceptable for us to look at the fact that we are likely to have a vaccine, and this soon will be over. So that's my comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Galloway. I'm going to make sure the speakers where everybody can use it. We have had 2 of the 6 of you speak in favor. Is there anyone else that would like to? Heather, I'm sorry. Thank you, Ted, for pointing you out. Yes, ma'am.
I knew you'd see me pretty soon.
Well, Ted had to remind me. I feel like I'm at Wimbledon. I'm looking left and looking right.
Well, I know that we've all heard from people in emails and personal conversations and phone calls, and it's been interesting because I like hearing everyone's points of views. Those that believe that COVID-19 is a serious pandemic and that we should be doing all the steps to control the virus, including wearing a mask, they have said to me comments that sometimes surprise me. Like, I don't, even though I live in Ozark, I don't shop in Ozark. I go to Springfield because they have a masking ordinance. I never thought of that. I never thought of us losing shoppers. I always thought, well, if we do a masking ordinance, we might lose people that will go where they don't have to wear a mask. But I've had several comments the other way around. They don't shop here in Ozark, and they're really wanting to. They really hope that we will pass this masking ordinance. They also say they're afraid to send their kids to school. They're terrified. They say, please pass a masking ordinance so we have a better chance of avoiding this. I have elderly people that do not leave their homes because they are so afraid of getting this. I have people that say it's the government's responsibility. Why are you even taking a survey of the public? You're the ones that are supposed to make a decision. It's not, you're there to make a good decision to protect the public. I didn't expect that. That was kind of interesting. I've heard that from several people. I don't eat in Ozark restaurants. I've heard that one too. I'd like to go to Ozark restaurants because I live here, but I won't because half the people are unmasked. So please pass it so I can start doing things in Ozark again. I guess it really surprised me because I guess I just had not thought of those issues. The other thing that is interesting to me is if you put the people that I've heard there are against the masking, for me, they fall in about 4 categories. You have the people that don't believe COVID-19 is real at all. And there are people out there that believe that. They believe that when the election comes, it's going to go away. There's those that believe that COVID-19 is real, but its effects are no more dangerous than the flu, and the data is overblown, and the masks are not necessary. There's that group. I noticed there's some of those. The other group believe that masks are ineffective, and they might even cause health problems. Then there's those that feel that it should not be mandatory, that it should be left up to everyone to decide. Well, all those people, when I ask them, okay, tell me what you think we should be doing then. I guess it's the answer, the 2 answers I seem to get from those groups of people that I'm not really comfortable with. And it is, oh, it's going to go away. Comes and it's going to go. I said, really? Yep. The other answer is herd immunity. Once 70% of the population gets it, it's just like the flu. It's going to come and it's go, and it won't be such a big thing anymore. Wow, 70%. Knowing me, I'll be one of those 70%. And that, I'm just not comfortable with those answers. And you know, if you think about it, we're all united in the same thing. We all want the same thing. We want this to go away. We want our lives back. We want our freedoms back to live our lives the way we want to. And we all want that to happen. It's just, how do you make that happen? And I really believe in the group, and I would have to represent that group with my vote for mandatory masking, thinking that we should be doing everything we can. And right now, what we know we can do is we can do masks, we can social distance, and we can, of course, wash hands. And I have no idea why we wouldn't be willing to try that if we could control this and get a handle on it. So I would vote yes for mandatory masking. Now, the only thing that I'm worried about in this bill or ordinance is the one that talks about restaurants. And it says that you would be exempt from wearing a mask in a eating or drinking establishment as long as you maintain a distance of 6 feet apart. I think that's the problem, because I think we're going back to and making the restaurants do what they did during the shutdown and when we reopened, and that is they have to control the number of people that are eating in their establishments. I would really like to see if we couldn't do something with that and not make the 6 feet mandatory when you're eating in a restaurant.
Okay, are you done, Heather?
I am, thank you.
Okay, well, I'm certainly not trying to hurry you up. All right, is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the ordinance? All right. Keep in mind that everybody can speak twice, so we will now go to those people who want to speak in opposition. All right, who wants to be first? All right, Mr. Schaefer.
So, as I mentioned at the previous meeting, the city has great power, and with great power comes great, responsibility. We have to look at this and treat it carefully, because we're asking 20 or 25,000 people to do a certain method of conduct. And although I am a freedom-loving guy and civil liberties, and I want everyone to make their own decisions, I'm certainly an open-minded individual. And if someone can come to me and show me that the mask will save a lot of lives, yeah, I'm on it. And if there's a demonstration of evidence that this is a great threat to our community, that's also comes into play. And I would be a horrible, awful person if I didn't consider those factors. So when I'm given an opportunity to talk to Dr. Trotman, and he's up there for an hour talking about how important it is that we have these masks, and I ask him basically one question: how much safer am I with a mask? And he says he doesn't know. Nobody knows. He knows we're safer, but he can't tell me how much safer. So what I'm provided is actually a non-answer. I don't have the information I need to compel my neighbors, my friends, to do something they don't want to do, because Dr. Trotman didn't give me the information I needed. I go to Dr. Spangler, who was present at the meeting, given 3 minutes to speak compared to an hour. Dr. Spangler is a doctor with a master's degree in public health. He is a member of the Fellow American Academy of Emergency Medicine. He provides me, in a short amount of time, a document, which we all have, which cites at least 4 different studies questioning the efficiency of masks. Well, that's consistent with Dr. Trotman says, because he can't tell me how safe masks are. So he doesn't get on the record saying it will save these many lives. But Dr. Spangler is able to cite for me actual documented evidence saying that masks are not all you think they are going to be. I am amazed that we can sit here and say if someone puts a mask on, that they're not going to get the disease. Now, the aldermen are going to say, well, we didn't say that. Well, what I hear is that if you put on a mask, our schools won't close. That conveys to the public that if you wear a mask, you won't get the disease. What I hear is that older people are staying home because they're afraid of the disease, but if we put masks on, they're going to come out. To me, that seems to be creating more trouble by getting people overconfident that these masks are going to protect them from a deadly disease. Then we have a question as to how is this affecting our community? There is a reason why the governor didn't issue a statewide mandate. There is a reason why the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services Director Dr. Randall Williams doesn't support a mandate. And that's because, according to them, we have 85 counties in the state of Missouri with 1 death or less. That this disease is not affecting every community the same. Therefore, mandates are not necessary as a universal answer for everyone's problems. Ozark, and I'm just reciting facts, the county of Ozark currently has 6 people in the hospital because of COVID. 6. In the last 5 months, they've had 18 people in the hospital from Christian County. And we're not even just talking about the city of Ozark. We're talking about the entire county. 18 people in 6 months, 5 months, 6 people currently in the hospital. I feel bad for each person that's gotten sick. I feel bad for each person that's in the hospital. But it's hard for me to be told that Dr. Trotman tells me he doesn't know how effective masks are. Dr. Spangler tells me how ineffective those masks are. The governor and the director of Health and Senior Services says it's up to us based on how bad it is in the community. I look up our local numbers per August 14th, and we only have 6 people that are sick. And we only had 18 people in the hospital in the last 5 months. And to me, those numbers would indicate that we don't need a mask mandate, all right? I want people in this community to believe in their city government. There's a reason this community voted 70% for Donald Trump. I know that upsets a lot of people, but the reason is because Donald Trump says question government, all right? And then we take polls and we ask questions and we get answers we don't like, and we go ahead and do what they don't want. And that's how city government gets in trouble. And that's how city government loses funding, because taxes won't be passed if the city if the citizens of this county believe that you're not following their wishes, and if we're enacting ordinances that aren't supported by the facts, okay? I want people to wear masks. I believe it does contain the spread of the disease in a small manner, but I do not want to be the person to tell my neighbors, to tell my friends to put on that mask or face criminal punishment, to be prosecuted, to be fined. And in essence, it's an unfunded mandate too, because we're telling them to buy something and to wear something that we're not going to be providing them. I appreciated the efforts of the county and the city to educate the public and who in the program of who you're masking for. I thought it was brilliant. We obviously have people who are following masking and compliance and doing it voluntarily. I have always said we should continue education. We should provide free masks. We should work with the businesses that want to use masks, but let's not get into a position where we're compelling people to do things that they don't want to do. Now, I have asked, and I think everyone understands, I'm going to read Dr. Spangler's statement. He didn't have an opportunity to provide it fully at the last meeting. I tried to have him provide it today live, but it was contrary to our rules. All right, this is from Dr. Spangler. The question to be answered before you cast your vote regarding the Ozark face covering ordinance is, what is to be gained? Despite claims of certainty by Drs. Trotman and Bauman, the experts, their testimony was fear-based and not factual. Just recall the number of times they each used the words, I fear. This is emotion, not science. There is no scientific basis for such a mandate. If there is indeed an ongoing life threat in this country, much less in this region of the country, there should be data to support it and to prove the efficiency of non-pharmaceutical interventions such as wearing face coverings. Anecdotes about hairdressers and the like simply do not fit the definition of proof by the scientific method. This is a case of fear-mongering. In January, this country and the world were facing an unknown, probable threat, but as time has progressed, evidence has grown that the threat is much less than we were led to believe, yet some are wanting to perpetuate the fear. Masking the population is symbolic of this brokering of fear and surrendering our rights. For an honest analysis of the threat, let us start with the matter of case definition. The current CDC definition is so vague as to allow the inclusion of individuals without PCR, which is polymerase chain reaction, or serologic antibody verification. So all these cases actually due to SARS-CoV-2 or not. To be sure, a substantial portion of the cases should be thrown out of the data, but only if one wants truth and a valid study. In addition, every country has been extremely liberal in defining a COVID death. Just last week, the UK changed their definition of a COVID death from any death occurring within 60 days of a positive test of COVID to any death occurring within 30 days of a positive test for COVID. Neither of these make logical sense. There is no consideration given for the comorbid conditions involved. Because of this useless overreaching definition, we've had reports of people killed in traffic collisions and dying of heart attacks being attributed to COVID. No wonder people are scared. When the news anchor comes on talking like a sportscaster with the new amazing scores of the day and giving inappropriate airtime to alarmists like Governors Cuomo, Newsom, and Whitmer, who seem to be competing for the title of worst case of all. Politicians, the media, and even epidemiologists love terms like pandemic and epidemic because they are non-numeric. There is no clear way to determine when a pandemic is over. These are useful only in research and clinical setting. Anywhere else, they incite fear and convey no information. Medical history, and all physicians know this or they should, medical masks were never intended to prevent inhalation of infectious material. They are theorized, but never proven, to prevent seeding an operative field with bacteria from the surgical team. This tacit understanding is present in all the research and review articles I have read, and the only face coverings that are significantly better than no mask is an N95 respirator. How even that was based upon the mask being properly fitted by an experienced technician, but then to meet criteria for effectiveness, each mask was single use and discarded after soiled, damp, or worn for a prolonged period of time. Interpretation. Rates of infection in the medical, aka surgical mask group, were double that in the N95 group. A benefit of respirators is suggested, but need to be confirmed by a larger trial, as this study may have been underpowered. This finding on fit testing is specific to the type of respirator used in the study and cannot be generalized to other respirators. Regarding the N95, an extensive review by Afudu and Young found that wearing a medical mask or N95 respirator throughout the work shift conferred significant protection only against self-reported clinical respiratory illness and influenza-like illnesses. Meta-analysis suggested a protective but non-statistically insignificant or significant effect against laboratory-confirmed viral infections. Beware of the terminology. No matter how great a reduction is found in self-reported illnesses, it is subjective, it was not confirmed on lab testing, and therefore is useless information. The symptoms could have been congestion due to the wearing of mask, low-grade allergy to the components of the mask, seasonal allergy, or anything but a provable viral infection. So no useful protection against viruses. Another study compared surgical masks and N95 respirators. Included we could not demonstrate efficiency of medical mask against any outcome. Medical masks may have efficiency, but if so, the degree of efficiency is too small to detect in the study. The authors did state that specific uses showed some respiratories to have utility, but only targeted use of a respirator N95 or superior was effective. No efficiency was demonstrated for medical masks alone. We have used N95 respirators in the ER setting several times during my years of practice, and after a single use, they are discarded with disposable gowns we wore. So what are you recommending in your mandate? In addition, the authors clarified that clinical data, not theories and models, are superior guides to policy. Where is the clinical data for Ozark? Jacobs et al. Conducted a study in Japan where face mask wearing is quite common regarding the common cold, coronavirus. Review of their data, they concluded that face mask use in healthcare workers has not been demonstrated to provide benefits in terms of cold symptoms or getting colds. This is a particular use since common cold is a coronavirus, and the study used healthcare workers as their subjects. Therefore, we can infer that this data applies to SARS-CoV-2. No benefit. Looking around the room or the Walmart, how many cloth masks do you see? Lots and lots. They are fashionable, pretty. They send a message that they are more for comfortable. They are especially common among the police and many white-collar workers, but they are worse than useless. In fact, the data establishes significant risk to both the user and the public from any sort of cloth face covering, and he cites a study. Conclusion, this study is the first randomized controlled trial of cloth masks, and the results caution against the use of cloth masks. This is an important finding to inform occupational health and safety, moisture retention, reuse of cloth masks, and poor filtration may result in increase of infection. So what are you recommending? By now you should be aware that cloth and surgical masks were never intended to protect the user or the general public. So if you vote to mandate anything, you must go with the data by a ton of N95 respirators. But in the final analysis, they too will prove to be a waste of money and assault on liberty. Anything less, and you are perpetuating a lie while padding the pockets of mask profiteers. And again, he cited 6 different references when he provided his written opinion to this board. I'm not saying that Dr. Spangler is better than Dr. Trotman. I'm saying Dr. Spangler did a better job documenting his statements. Dr. Trotman, when asked, could not convey the basic information I needed as to how effective masks are. I want to save lives and I want to have fewer people, but I'm not inclined to restrict the liberty or to instruct 25,000 people to do something that they don't want to do based on the information that's been provided to me so far. So tonight I will vote no against the mask ordinance. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Who else would like to speak in opposition?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. The quiet man behind me, Mr. Smith.
That's good. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to try not to repeat anything that's been repeated. I'm going to try to keep it brief. A couple things I think is, I think it's important to know, I'm not disagreeing with the data, but I think it's important to know that the data that has been presented only came from Cox Hospital. The 20% positive rate was actually 18.2. They rounded it to 20, but at the time it was 18.2, and using that same data set that Cox Hospital produced, Nixa went from 25% positive rate round numbers down to 8% positive rate round numbers using that same data set. But it was only Cox data. It was not Christian County tested people as an entirety. It was only those that went through the Cox Health System and the Cox labs. Doesn't mean it's wrong, but I just think it's important to understand we were only told about a subset of data. We were not told about the whole county as a whole. I heard that 65% of the COVID cases come from outside of Greene County. I think that's good to know, because I think historically Cox total admissions pre-COVID, 66%, 2/3 came from outside of Greene County. So it's good to know that their admissions for COVID do not appear to be any different than their normal admissions to Cox Hospital. Again, doesn't mean it's wrong, doesn't mean it's right. It just, I think it's important to understand when you're talking about data, I think it's important to understand where it's coming from. Dr. Troutman has said that 70% is the goal for wearing masks. The physician that we've heard about so much tonight and the other night that we had this, has said 70% of wearing the mask is the goal. My question is, where are we at? How close are we to that 70%? Or are we at 70%? But he said that was the goal. 100% is not the goal. 70% is the goal. So I just question where we're at, and I think we should know that number if that's the medical goal before we mandate something for 100% of the world. Now, I need everybody to hear. As a freshman in high school, I was a three-sport letterman my freshman year. I was a three-sport letterman every single year of my high school career. Okay, sports is a big deal to me. I'm wearing a University of Louisville mask right now. It's a big deal to me. Okay, I want us to separate from the school. I keep hearing from social media, I keep hearing from some emails, I keep hearing from even discussions tonight, it's our responsibility to keep the schools open. If I've got a battleship and I've got a dang big hole in the middle side of it, and I am not trying to patch that hole and I am not trying to get the water out of the battleship, I cannot keep it afloat. And I can't be responsible for doing it if I'm not taking appropriate actions. It is not me who is saying that the school has a big hole. It is the CDC, August the 7th, their most recent, they've done it before this, their most recent update to their youth sports says that full contact competition between teams from different geographic areas outside the county or state is highest risk for COVID transmission. Now, I just heard that Dr. Troutman and the CDC both said we've learned that youth are higher transmitters of COVID than we knew before. My only point on this is not anti-sport, but the city cannot be responsible for the school staying open or not, as long as they have this big gapping hole in the side of their ship. Now, that's not her, I can't even say the word, whatever Mr. Galloway said. That is fact from the CDC. You can read it, updated August 7th, 2020, playing sports, coronavirus disease 2019. The higher risk, they list 5 categories from lowest to highest. Higher risk is full competition between teams from the same local geographic area, i.e. the city or county. If you look at the Ozark football schedule, 7, if we count Republic being inside Christian County, which I know that we could argue one way or the other on that one potentially, but if we count Republic being inside of Christian County, 7 out of the 10 games they play this year are for teams outside the county, including Joplin, which we know what's going on over there, or has been going on over there. So my point isn't anti-sports. My point is we cannot be held responsible for holding the schools open or not. as long as they knowingly are doing a high-risk activity, not the high risk, highest risk according to the CDC. We cannot be responsible, regardless if we pass this or not. Regardless if we pass this or not. It is not on the city as long as the school has that big, wide gap that they have in front of them. Now, when we look at some things, and again, I don't know, I'm not, I'll self-confess, I'm not the expert on this. Spain and France have been masked for some time. In fact, some of the emails we received said that we need to follow the example of Spain and France. Spain and France are in turmoil because they've got unbelievable rates of infection right now. Okay, Illinois has been masked since May the 1st. Region 4, however they define that, the governor, Region 4, which covers what I refer to as right across the river from St. Louis, Belleville, Scott Air Force Base, that area right there. Region 4 is now getting shut down more, even though they've been masked since May the 1st. The governor announced over the weekend they're shutting them down more because their infection rates continue to go up. Somebody mentioned North Carolina. UNC announced today, after 137 positive cases, they are going 100% remote after being on campus for 1 week. We have schools in Georgia, Tennessee, Phoenix, and I believe Alabama that have been open already and have already shut down. Does that mean we will? No. My point again is, as long as knowingly doing the highest risk activity being exempted by the school, we cannot be responsible. That's it. That's all I'm going to say on that one. Now, Alderperson Heather, I'm sorry. I was just getting ready to butcher your name, apologize. You said the comment about the 6 foot in the restaurants and not really liking that in the ordinance. And I absolutely concur with you and agree with that, because that's not just saying wear a mask or not wear a mask, we're now putting limitations on them too. And I absolutely agree with you. But here's my counter to that though. For us, if we were to consider, I do agree with you, so I mean, hear that, please. But for us to consider exempting restaurants so they don't have to be 6 foot, the question I would have, is that a political decision or is that a health decision? Because the health decision, if we follow the CDC and WHO, the health and our own Christian County Health Department, the health decision would say we have to maintain 6 foot social distancing. That's part of my problem. This bill isn't a health bill. This is a political bill because we're not following health guidance. We are partially following health guidance, but we're not entirely. So once we don't entirely, I kind of view that as when you have a glass of water and you drop a thing of ink in it. You can't separate the ink and the water anymore. It's all mixed together. If this was strictly a health bill, it would be more applicable for me to vote for it, but it's not. It's a political bill. We choose the age of 10. That is not medically backed. That's a political decision. We decided to exempt people that we can't control. And I agree with Mr. Galloway. I don't want to issue search warrants and get into private offices and things of that sort. But if this is a health bill, CDC doesn't differentiate whether it's private or public. This says 6 foot social distancing and you can't wear a mask. So there's at least 2 examples of where this is a political bill. And even though I agree with you, Heather, on the restaurants, and I don't like it, if we were to consider changing that, that's a political decision. It's not a health-based decision. And this either is a health bill and a health crisis, or this isn't. For me, it's very black and white. And if we wanted to institute a health ordinance, then follow the CDC guidelines, period. Be done with it and we're good to go. That's following health. But the moment we introduce political stuff into it, it's now like that water in the drop of ink. It's no longer a health bill. It's a political bill. And I will rest.
All right. All right, just to be sure we follow our, yeah, I was gonna ask RJ. Yeah, just to be sure we follow, we need to give RJ an opportunity to speak before anybody else does. So Mr. Flores.
Well, I won't repeat anything either. I won't put anybody through that. But there's just a couple things I wanted to point out, and that's while we're hearing people talk in favor of this, there's different things that are being said, like we know there's more conversations that need to be had, talking towards exemptions, things like that. Like we know there's particular things that aren't being taken into account, but we're still going forward with it. We're talking about things like the restaurants, like, well, I wouldn't want to see that happen, but we're still going forward with it. We're taking a poll of how our citizens feel about it, but we're not really taking that into consideration. We're just doing a lot of different things but we're pushing this forward. We don't want to make people do things. We don't want to put fines on them, but we're still going to do that. And this is something where I think it's bringing us a false sense of security. We're talking about our elderly coming out. And if you're health compromised, I don't think that a mask is going to be the difference between that. And I think that's a shame to put so much attention on masks when there's other things that we should be paying attention to. And we don't even care about that now. All we care about is masks. Are we going to wear them or are we not? Because apparently that's the difference between success and failure. And I think that's a shame. And we're at a point right now where when we open up our schools, the chances of getting COVID in our schools is outrageous. And so what? If we don't mandate masks, it'll be because we didn't mandate masks. But if we do, and it still happens, which it's more than likely going to, whether we like it or not, that's just reality. What's going to happen then? Even though we did mandate masks. And so I think that we have a lot of conflicting ideas and a lot of conflicting things. And I think really the only way forward is for us as a community to listen to our community, listen to a lot of people who are saying, I don't mind wearing masks. I just don't want to be told that I'm going to. I don't want to be forced to, and I'm not going to be fined. And we're taking that responsibility when we know we can't enforce it. And we want what? The business owner to enforce that? And if they don't, we're going to fine them. It's on them. They have to do that. There's just a lot of, this doesn't hold water. It's not a good bill. We shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be mandating masks in our town, especially when we know we need to keep educating and we need to keep telling people, not just educating about wearing masks, but more importantly, the social distancing, keeping our hands clean, those things, and not be distracted by something so political. So I rest with that.
All right, I was writing some notes. Okay, every alderman has had a chance to speak, and those that wanted to speak in favor have, those that want to speak in opposition have, but our rules allow for each one to have a second opportunity. So I don't know that the rules, Amanda, let me ask you a question. Do we need to go in the same order of in favor and in opposition, or can it just be in any order that they wish to speak?
The rules don't clarify that, so you can establish that.
All right, I would like to establish that the floor is now open for additional comments. Each one of you will have one additional opportunity to speak, and that's it. So who would like to go first?
I guess I would run it.
All right, Mr. Poston.
I'll be incredibly quick. I thought it was interesting that you heard 6 people tonight say that they supported masks, and not 6 will vote against, or will not vote. Not 6 will vote for this. That seems interesting to me. All this data that some people have show that these are ineffective, and yet 6 people support masks. I hope that after we take this vote here in a few minutes, that Mr. Flores and Mr. Smith will get together. I know that both of you spoke out saying that this ordinance didn't go far enough. I look forward to the bill that you guys will have that will take this the next step, that will close those gaps so that we truly are, a safe community. I can't imagine you would have made those points without also intending to, bring up a bill that would seem political to me. I think that the fact that this bill's nuanced, the fact that the mayor can make changes to make it nuanced, the fact that we can recognize that Ozark is a little bit different than this community and that other state, The fact that we can take CDC guidelines, that we can take medical recommendations, that we can customize them for our culture and our population, I think that's exactly what we want to do. That's what we do in planning and zoning. We're provided a framework. Engineers and architects give us a framework, and then we jump in there and we figure out how do we take this framework and make it Ozark. I don't know that we're doing anything different right here. I'm only going to make one more comment. I know that twice tonight I heard that this was a big, this wasn't, this bill was a bit of overreaction because we only have, Christian County that is, one dam. I don't know how many we need before we'll take action, but I don't plan on finding out. I think one's enough for me until this board is willing to rescind its emergency order and say that, nope, we're good. Then I'm going to continue to fight against this disease, or as Mr. Schaefer called it, this deadly disease. I'm done, Your Honor.
All right. Who would like to be next? Any one of you all? Everybody has the opportunity to speak twice. All right, I don't want to cut it off, but if nobody has anything to speak or, I'm sorry, what?
Heather.
Okay, Heather, I'm sorry. I looked the other way just momentarily, please.
That's okay. Just final comment. I would be I would rather be guilty of doing too much than nothing at all. And I feel that even though we have evidence of countries that have gotten the COVID problem under control, we have evidence that New York had a terrible problem and their rate now is 1%. We see all the things that they have done, the distancing, staying in place, mask. I just don't feel good not voting yes to mandating masking. I feel we have to do something. We just keep raising the cases, keep raising, the deaths keep raising. Okay, it's just one. Oh, not bad. Like Nathan said, how many how many do you want to go with? Why do you think it's going to stop? So I still would vote yes to mandate masking. Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Smith. I'm going to pass that down to Ted.
I'm going to say that what we are doing is what we did when we had the press conference with the county, Nixa, Ozark, the schools, Show Me Christian County, the chambers, and whoever else was there, is education. Because I do think that education is important. I mean, just a couple hours ago, I was on a plane full of an airplane full of people who had no idea what they were doing with their mask and wearing them horribly. I think education is important because it is a false sense of reality. It's a false sense of security. I see it over and over again. Again, I ask the question, where are we at to Dr. Troutman's goal of 70%? Are we there? Are we not there? How close are we? But we had an objective then to educate our community, to produce posters, to do things to support our businesses and things of that sort. We have barely had time for that to start. Now, again, using the data set that Cox used, how do you explain Nixa, who also doesn't have a mask ordinance, going from 25% positive rate down to 8%? In the exact same data set, the exact same time frame is what they said that we were so horrible. Or was it because we were the next up to have a meeting on this? It's a big question in my mind because you can't explain that from a medical perspective. And I've not heard an explanation of how Nixa can go the exact opposite way, but nobody's questioning them not having a mask ordinance because they don't have it on their agenda, but all of a sudden we're the target. But education is a key. I just came from Colorado last week. It's a state mandate out there. Every military base, I was on 3 different military bases. I wore my mask. It's not about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. And it really isn't. But it's about whether you mandate it or not, or whether you see if what you said at your press conference, if you actually follow through with it, will work or not. And I think education is important. And I think if we did that, like we said we would at the press conference, that we are doing something. And we're doing something by having this discussion and this debate. And we had medical professionals we had a medical professional speak to us at the last meeting. One medical professional that I'm aware of. Give us a viewpoint. We've had other viewpoints. We're having a healthy debate. But what we're also doing is we're striking a lot of fear in this community and a lot of anxiety and a lot of, quite honestly, some stuff that I've understood people have said to Alderman that is just unacceptable. And just talking to whoever's listening to this, I take great offense. I don't care what side of the fence you are. If you talk bad to one of my aldermen, I take great offense to that. I don't care if you were my best friend. I don't care if you're on my side. I take great offense to it. Don't do it. This is charged up enough that as a community, we should not fight. Argue, debate, absolutely. Do it all night long, don't care. But you don't ever talk bad about my alderman and my alder people. You don't do it. But we are doing something, Heather. We are doing something. And again, is it enough? I don't know. I'm not the expert. Is it too much? I don't know. But if we're already at 70%, we already met the goal. So let's find out if we're at 70% or not. And if we are, Dr. Troutman says that's the go. So let's just find that out first. If we're at 40% or something egregiously less than the goal, then all minds, let's do it. Well, let's do it. And then once we get to the goal, and once someone can tell us, like Mr. Schaefer said, what is the criteria for us to take these damn things off? But they can't tell us that, nor can they tell us the criteria for putting them on other than just do it. Somebody said something about a slippery slope. That's a slippery slope. I wasn't there, but I heard, and again, if I heard it wrong, I apologize, that the same medical professional said he would be in favor of mandating a vaccine. Slippery slope, very slippery slope. Only about 35% of the population take a flu shot annually on a basis. Dr. Fauci has said, our goal is to get a 60 to 70% effective vaccine. The FDA has said they will approve anything that's over 50%. So you're going to take something like the flu, and I'm not arguing whether the flu is dangerous, more dangerous, less dangerous, doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm just talking about the principle. You're going to take something like the flu that not too long ago, we had major outbreaks somewhere around here. I don't remember exactly where. Shut down schools, seems like, or somewhere in the region. Might have been up north, I don't remember. But you're going to take something like the flu that we only get 35% of the population on any given year will take the flu shot. And we're going to expect that people are going to just step in line. A survey was done the other day, 37% of people said if it was absolutely free and you came to my doorstep, I will not take it. So when you hear a medical professional say, I'm in favor of mandating something like that, that's a slippery slope. And that's where we're at on this. We're a very slippery slope, just like the restaurants. Again, I don't like it. I do not like it. But just like the restaurants, if we exempt it and say they don't have to stay 6 feet away, we're in violation of the CDC. We are slippery slope. If we tell the school it's okay to do a high risk activity based upon what the CDC says, we're a slippery slope. We don't know why we're wearing these masks other than people tell us to, but they don't know what they work or don't work. Duke came out the other day with a study that said the gator mask and bandanas are worse than not wearing anything at all. Our ordinance allows people to wear those. But Duke Health did the study of 14 popular masks that are being worn right now. Those 2 were horrible. They were worse than wearing no mask at all. Everything says the mask only works as long as you also are social distancing. Every says that. So there's in so many areas, we are slippery slope. We are very slippery slope on something that we know very little about at this point. We know very little about this virus at this point. From a science and a medical, we know very little. And we already have some of the most stringent responses that I've ever seen in my lifespan governments take. We've already seen so much just do it because we say to, without being able to medically back it up, other than just saying it will slow it, like Mr. Schaefer said. Can somebody please tell me how much it will slow it? Is it 0.5%, 1%, 10%, 20%, 30%? What's the number? I mean, I'm not going to buy into, well, they told us not to wear a mask early on. They told us not to wear a mask early on because there was a concern about shortage of masks in the medical professions. So I don't buy that argument. But when they later came out and said it, they needed to tell us why. And the reason has to be better than I told you so. And thus far, it's it. That's slippery slope. That's slippery slope. I'm repeating myself, so I will rest.
Well, we have two aldermen that have not spoken, or three, I guess. That would be Bruce, RJ, or Jason. Either of you all want to speak again? Not required. Okay, Jason says no. RJ says no. Bruce. All right. We have gone through everybody's opportunity to speak, and they have not, or they have not indicated that they want to speak anymore. So if discussion is done, why, I guess there needs to be a call for the question.
Yes, Your Honor. I move that we adopt Bill 3170 as ordinance 20-054.
Is there a second? Okay, okay. That was a real quiet second, Heather. I'm sorry. All right, motion is made by Alderman Poston, seconded by Alderman Alder to adopt Bill 3170 as ordinance 20-054. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Flores,
Nay.
Alderman Alder,
Aye.
Alderman Schaefer,
I abstain.
I beg your pardon?
I abstain.
Well, that's an interesting comment. Okay. All right, move on. All right, abstain.
Alderman Smith,
Nay.
Alderman Galloway,
Aye.
and Alderman Poston.
Aye.
All right, there are 3 aye votes, 2 no votes, and 1 abstention. This bill requires 4 votes to either be affirmative or negative to pass. And so it does not have enough votes to pass. So I guess because of the abstention, it fails. Is that a correct reading, Ms.? Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Ms. Callaway, for that interpretation. All right, the bill fails. There will not be a mask ordinance. Okay, I would like to make a few comments. I can do that at this point, can I not, Amanda? All right. Because you're going to get them. I've got 2 pages of notes here. The red ink is before tonight's meeting, and the blue ink is as a result of tonight's meeting. And I feel that we have an obligation to the community to address what appears to be a public health issue. It is a public health issue. There are all other aspects of it. I have listened to countless people, and anybody that would challenge me on that, I have got a folder of printed emails and comments and telephone conversations So I have talked to a lot of people. I think we have to listen to them, and I think we have to do the public good. But I want to tell you that if this had been a tie, I would have voted against it because I agree with RJ that the bill is flawed. I am not against masking. Absolutely not. I think it is, if we can do anything, we should be doing it. But there's too much inconsistent studies of effectiveness of masks to say that our definition of a face covering just is not adequate. If we're going to require a mask, we need to be more specific. There are just too many flaws. I don't want to put the restaurants or any of the businesses in the position of having to do our job for us. I don't think that's right. I also recognize the incredible difficulty in our police department enforcing this, or any sort of judicial restraining order type things that this calls for. I just don't like that. But I can't help but think that we need to do something because I think we're ignoring a significant problem if we don't. Now, I would like to see people do this voluntarily. I'm going to step on some toes here, and I'm sorry because I love every one of you. Pam and I eat out a lot here, but I know that there are restaurants that require their servers to wear masks, and I prefer to go to those restaurants. And there's some that don't, and some of my favorite places, and I just am uncomfortable with that. But I think what I would like to see, since this has essentially failed, is if there are things that this Board of Aldermen thinks we should take up, I would entertain a better bill. I don't know what that is. I think we've identified some things tonight that could put in it. But I don't know what that would be. The staff did the best they could. We're not faulting the staff for the fact that it's a flawed bill. I asked for a bill, a draft bill, and the things that we considered flaws did not come out. Some of them last week, but some of them tonight. It's not their fault. This is just healthy discussion. And to say that we're going to vote it down and not do anything, that's wrong. But it would be equally wrong to pass a bad bill. And so I would be open to any alderman, alder persons, to any of you 6 that would like to help, if you feel it's necessary to bring this up again, to help author a better bill. I'm not going to ask the staff to do that. So if any of you all want to do that, we would have to figure out how to go about having meetings without having a quorum, or it would have to be something that was that Amanda would approve, but I'd be open to that. So I guess that's all I've got to say. So it has failed. We do not have a mask ordinance. I'm sure there are a lot of people celebrating at watch parties tonight, but I would really encourage this entire community to take this seriously. Even if you don't think masks are the answer, wear them. Respect what other people want. And if you can do anything, do it. It's not just about you. It's about a community that we've got to protect. And we've got a great community and an obligation to do everything we can. So that's done. All righty, all right, there is a report from the Planning and Development Director, written report. Any questions or comments to Mr. Smith about that, or would you like any comments, Mr. Smith? Apparently not. Okay.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Okay, thank you. Samantha, anything to add on your written report? Okay, nothing to add from Ms. Payne on hers. Any other comments, announcements for members of the board or the mayor? No, I've already made mine. Any other comments? All right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Smith and Poston. All in favor? Thank you all very much for your patience. This is an important deal that we did tonight. So thank you very much. Well, that was a surprise.